Hi, I'm Hamish, General Manager of ThirdEye. CROs today operate in an ever-changing environment. They're responsible not only for risk and compliance, but also for driving business performance. As part of this series, we're meeting with CROs from leading financial institutions to understand how they're adapting and to share insights with our community. Today, we're meeting with Bob Liang, who has extensive experience as a CRO at both domestic and international fintechs. Bob, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Hamish.
Risk leaders and CROs come from diverse backgrounds. So to kick us off, would you mind sharing a little bit about your history and what excites you about the work you do?
Definitely. So I cut my teeth at the corporate regulator, ASIC, before moving into Macquarie and the big four banks, working in operational risk as well as customer resolutions. I've also spent some time working as a payments lawyer at critical payments national infrastructure. And in the last few years, I've been a chief risk officer across some domestic and international fintechs and startups. In terms of what gets me out of bed and excites me, I've got to say it's the people. It's the fact that we're working in a very values-driven, hungry team who are breaking APIs and code. But at the same time, really committed to this shared vision of making sure payments can be accessible for a whole range of diverse end users.
Fantastic. And you mentioned that idea of vision. One of the things that I've noticed working with CROs and doing this series is that a lot of CROs and generally people in this industry are really purpose-driven by preventing financial crime. Is there a time that you would draw on, or an example you would give around the work that you and your team's done, which has had a really strong impact in that regard?
Yeah, so I'd like to say, which I tell my team as well, like every day, the work that they're doing is absolutely important and matters, whether that's for our customers, for merchants and end users, our technology partners and vendors, as well as the regulator. I guess one moment that's significant that I can think of is when I was working at a $2 billion payments unicorn, a global fintech, where our team was, our small Australian team actually, was responsible for the migration of one of the largest card programs in APAC. The team very graciously worked overtime and lent into, working across a number of, I think it was 5 time zones, cross-functional teams, looking to, what did we achieve in the end? Looking to bring about 3,500 merchants onto our book and 110,000 cards issued by Visa. So it was a lot of work. It was a lot of sort of education uplift as well for some of these offshore teams, such as understanding the nuances around Australian trust structure. But the end result, what we saw was, now seeing the largest card program being established in the Asia Pacific, a happy spend management client, and a broadly, compliant KYB process. So that's what makes you, I'm really proud of your team and what you do every day.
Absolutely. You obviously work at the intersection of technology and compliance and risk. And I think from my perspective as the leader of a technology business, it can feel like at the moment like the world's moving a little bit with everything going on.
Yeah, sure.
From your perspective, at a macro level, what are the things that are really changing or that you're having to think about as a leader in the space at the moment?
Yeah, so many big things apart from even things like geopolitical tensions and working through how that looks like on a sanctions or PEP basis. But just thinking about some key broad themes, I think absolutely cybersecurity and privacy are important things that we need to be front and center of because boards and other executives are sort of demanding that, seeing what's coming through in terms of some of the challenges and even sort of the negative news press that has affected both financial and non-financial service industries. I think also there's this growing understanding that the key regulators in the space have high expectations of what they're looking for in in the industry participants. So, regulatory horizon scanning, being able to be proactive rather than reactive in this space, just understanding, we've got things like Tranche 2 AML reforms coming through next year. How do you set yourself up for success before that, and how do you help partner with your end users who actually are now coming into that sort of framework and reporting sort of compliance requirements? How do you help them, drive their success? So I think overall it is an ongoing piece that is going to require a lot of thought and a lot of actually collaboration with other partners and our peers as well. And I think it's just exciting to be able to do that, and supported by technology vendors and partners who have expertise as well in that space.
You mentioned collaboration, which is actually a theme which has come through in a number of these conversations, and also the regulator, and kind of being proactive with the regulator. In terms of tactically, what does that look like, and how do you think about that from a best practice perspective, so that you can be side by side with them as opposed to carrot, more of a stick, so to speak?
Yeah, I think it's been helpful spending some time at ASIC in my earlier days, and also being a payments lawyer, because there's a certain sort of thinking, I guess, when it comes to just approaching Chapter 7 of the Corporations Act efficiently, honestly, fairly. The whole AFSL framework, there are nuances there. That I'm very grateful for some of my past experiences, as well as mentors like a general counsel who really sort of poured into and invested her time into giving me some of these perspectives. But as you mentioned, as we've talked about, it is an evolving beast. What was true 5 years ago likely is no longer the case today. So I guess big principles wise, I think it's absolutely important to be transparent with the regulator, and I'll say that even in working in some of the more high risk or riskier sort of businesses, where the regulators actually probably know that there are things that might not be fully clean, I guess, within your shop, but they really do, from my experience, take a lot of credibility or view your credibility in a much greater way when you're able to be forthright and come forward with, okay, here are some of the things that we need to work through. We've taken the opportunity to do, an internal audit. We're cleaning up shop. Here are things that aren't, quite right, but we've got a remediation program. This is the time frame for it. All this feeds into the piece that, it's a conversation that you're having with the regulator. You're treating them, at arm's length, but also as equals. You're not trying to, pull the wool over their rug. And I think it probably also helps when I can share, like, oh, yep, is that person still there? Actually, at ASIC, we went through the same graduate program together. So, not everyone obviously can, have that sort of connection. But I think when it comes to the regulator, it's not thinking of them as too high or too low. A lot of them actually do come from industry or from similar backgrounds to what other CROs might be doing. And once you have that sort of understanding that, the ultimate goal here is to minimize or mitigate the risks in the payment ecosystem. The payments ecosystem is only as robust or resilient as the lowest common denominator. If an external or fraud actor, or bad actor comes through, you actually want to nip it at the bud, wherever it is within that ecosystem. And that's where, just that very clear, concise, and, hopefully helpful engagement with the regulator is absolutely going to be beneficial, not just for your business and its, I guess, reputational sort of relationship with, say, the likes of AUSTRAC and ASIC, but also with ensuring that, issues like fraud are better managed and benefits all.
Fantastic. Yeah, it feels like with your background and experience, you're well placed to thread that line between private and the regulator, which is fantastic.
Oh, always learning, and I think it's an ongoing journey. Yeah.
In terms of switching gears a little bit, Bob, and thinking about the risk function, and given that backdrop, enabling the business to be successful, how do you think about the risk function and the CRO as being an enabler for the business, as opposed to just ticking boxes, so to speak?
Yeah, I think I've always reminded my team that risk is an enabler. It's not an obstacle. It's not even simply a protection mechanism for the business. How does that look like? I think really starts with culture and the tone from the top. So it's about being aligned with, as a CRO, with your CEO and the executive team, about understanding that, let's take the risk-reward matrix and even flip it so we can prioritize reward. Yes. And how do we find solutions to make things work, especially when we're on that growth journey. And the other piece behind that is, I guess, I think it's natural as a risk professional, especially as you go through the ranks, to have tendencies that are more around being detail oriented, to be looking at things like downsides, to be wedded to the processes. However, once you step into a CRO role and you need to be thinking more like a business manager and more strategically in order to help the business go where they need to go, which is usually always growth for a fintech, then that's where understanding risk appetites, risk matrices, controls, and the various processes that help protect the business can actually be tailored, streamlined, be fit for purpose, so that we're able to grow, but in a compliant fashion.
Cool. You mentioned the word fit for purpose there, which is sometimes I hear a lot, particularly with that other side of the coin from risk, I guess, which is around cost, and particularly with some of the pressures on at the moment. For you, what does fit for purpose mean? How do you think about implementing that within the business?
Yeah, no, I think a good example to use or to think through for that, Hamish, would be, I guess, the risk BAU, I guess, processes that are used within the organisation, and when we think about working with vendors or technology partners, they generally have things that may cost a fair dime, but actually are fairly regulated, compliant, and automated. So I think in my past experience with global and domestic fintechs, while I believe a lot of the processes we use, including like Excel spreadsheets, may have been more manual and less automated, they were fit for purpose for the size and scale of the business at that time. And yet, there's still, as we had as well, ongoing discussions with technology vendors and partners to understand how can we leverage AI, how can we leverage automation in order to make compliance smoother, not just for the end user and our merchant clients, but also for the team, so that they're actually doing work that makes a difference and that's value adding, rather than, I guess you can call it, more rudimentary, or tick the box exercises.
That makes sense. And then if we think about the CRO role, has that changed over the last few years?
I think so. Honestly, I think there's certainly been more of a commercial appreciation on my side, at least, as we've moved from I guess the heyday of fintechs, especially in Australia, to more of a fintech winter, and then being very resourceful, I guess, with perhaps the budget and the team that you're given. And I can say I have been, very thankful to have been able to work with a number of very professional, I guess, colleagues to help us achieve the right goals in that space. I guess another area where things have been changing is, I might have mentioned it a little bit earlier actually, around the regulators' expectations. Regulatory horizon scanning absolutely needs to be more of a focus and priority. And it's something that, again, if we just look at things around the Tranche 2 AML reforms, 90,000 new entities sort of coming through. We've got scams prevention framework, sector codes being rewritten in order to help protect customers, and the whole payments modernization within Australia. That has implications across all sort of areas of this life cycle, and it's something that I think if you overthink it, you're never going to be able to catch up. There seems to be, at least when you're on social media or LinkedIn, new sort of guidance coming out every day, or coming out at 7 p.m. on a Friday from AusTrack. So it's just about being very deliberate and concise with how you approach that. Okay. And I think the last thing, really, in relation to how I've thought about being a CRO in the fintech space, especially, is the fact that I guess different stages of the business, or different organizations, will require different things from the regulator, whether that's in a sort of a startup, or in a hyper-growth sort of SaaS company, or in a more mature sort of financial services organization. The expectations are going to change based on your stakeholder and the culture of the teams. So it's about being, really flexible and listening, to your immediate team, as well as to your fellow executives about the path that you're on.
Yeah. Bob, you mentioned this kind of theme around partnership a couple of times, whether that's working closely with the regulator, with your colleagues, technology providers, even thinking about what might be a traditional competitor, but from a regulatory perspective might actually be someone you can collaborate with. In terms of partners, how important are they for you in terms of your role, and how you think about them enabling you to achieve your goals?
I think partners, as the sort of term implies, are absolutely imperative to ensuring that we can get to where we are. I think it's rare that Rome is built in a day, and likewise, when you're almost building the plane or the spaceship as you fly it, as we call it in the fintech world, you need all the support and partnership, really, in order to help get you there. So one thing that strikes me, or that has come to my mind, is when I was working at New Payments Platform Australia, the fact that I was able to see how innovation and regulatory, overlay intersected in a very positive sort of way, because there were trusted regulators, there were transparent participants, and there were highly competent technology providers and partners who sometimes were even ahead of the game when it came to regulatory sort of concerns and addressing that, but we're able to help deliver on that and mitigate the risk in the ecosystem. So I've been a beneficiary of this.
Fantastic. Maybe the last one, Bob, was around, you mentioned before, AI and automation, and I think given your experience in the industry, you're uniquely placed to talk to this. How are you seeing the adoption of AI in the industry and around risk and compliance? And is there any kind of principles that you're using to help leverage that and adopt it in an effective way?
Yeah, no, this is the hot topic, right? I mean, AI is on the tip of the tongue for, I think, all risk leaders and CROs, at least when I join and partake, in those industry forums and ACAMS conferences and the like. You can't escape it. And it's even beyond, AI these days. We've got AGI, agentic AI. How do you take large language models, and adopt it or use it in the context of what's been a space that's been maybe not disrupted for a number of years. So I think two thoughts around that. I think when you're a fintech or a startup, and perhaps you don't have the infrastructure or the investment to be able to do this all in-house, because I think there's a lot of value in order to do it in-house to make it fit for purpose
Yeah.
for your business. But certainly at some of the organizations I've worked at, that just would not have been possible. Then that partnership again with technology vendors is absolutely crucial to look at moving from I guess batch to real-time payments screening to looking at transaction monitoring, leveraging AI where you can turn it on and off, because that's going to be what's needed when you've got so many transactions coming through.
Yes.
And I think the second point really is the fact that AI, while it presents a lot of opportunities and I guess hopefully helping things become more efficient and streamlined, it can actually be also taken up by, I guess, the other side, by bad actors, and used to, we've seen some of the, fake sort of voices or images that propagate sort of the internet, how that's been used to actually scam, even very sophisticated executives at financial services companies. While we have the tools, I guess you can say on the good side in compliance, in order to try to use it, for good. AI can absolutely be used by bad actors and scammers to continue to further their sort of aims and goals. And so I think, I think I'm moving a little bit away from the question, but it's my hobby horse now. It's really just being cognizant of that, not sort of burying your head in the sand and thinking, I've got this vendor, I'm wiping my hands clean, I'm able to deal with it. You're still going to need that human intervention. You're still going to need your team and to train your team well so they can recognize the red flags or see when things aren't matching up from a patterns perspective, so that you can actually benefit or help the business, again, mitigate things like financial losses and the reputational damage that can come from not having a consistent approach or policy towards, I guess, scams perpetrated through AI.
That principle of sort of human in the loop has been something that we've heard from a number of people, whether that's people like yourself in industry, also the regulator. It feels like a key piece, which is going to be critical in terms of the adoption of AI. Maybe to wrap up, Bob, would love to get your perspective on where you see the CRO role going in the future, and if you have any advice that you might give to other aspiring CROs or risk and compliance professionals in the space.
I'd love to hear what my fellow peers have to say, because I'm sure I could learn, a lot from them. But I think, for me, what I've learned in the last few years is probably actually, I think self-awareness of your tendencies as being a really key piece in all this. There are certain skills that compliance professionals, as they move up the ladder, it becomes more embedded in terms of how they think through things. Whether that's as we've discussed, being wedded to the process, being more conservative or looking at the downside, being very highly sort of detail oriented. And it's kind of ironic, I think, where when you have that seat at the table as a senior risk and compliance professional, that these things can become your blind spots if you're not careful. So it's about understanding that, and when things do escalate, hit the fan, and things don't always go to plan, then understanding what are your coping mechanisms to deal with that. Because when you do have a less, say, flexible approach, it's not going to lead to beneficial outcomes for how you manage your team, but also ultimately for the business itself. So I think that's something that I like to think I'm continually sort of learning and improving and taking away from my mentors or senior risk professionals in the space.
Yes.
And I think the other piece, I guess, if I was to give some advice, maybe to myself when I first sort of stepped into this hot seat, really is I guess I'm going to call it having a sense of humor, or at least humanness, showing a sense of humanity, because where you're able to show that you care, that you're invested in the success and the growth of your team and the business, the more that you're able to build sort of friends and aligned stakeholders across the table. And so that, I think, is a really important piece about being a CRO, especially post-COVID,
Yes.
post sort of geopolitical tensions, the fact that diplomacy and having that effective relationship building, so that you have a consistent narrative to share with the business and executive leadership team. It's not just about having a very structured key metrics with a risk appetite statement. That is always going to be important, but that's the baseline. It's about how you have that, as I said, that consistent narrative that brings people along the journey, so that risk ultimately is that enabler for business growth. I think something that's really excited to be doing day in, day out.
Yeah, I feel like that's fantastic advice, Bob. And it's interesting that theme around some of the softer skills is something that's come through from a number of people. And I think a great place for us to land and some fantastic advice for people to take away. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Hamish.